Thank you. Since I'm the presenter, so I'll start by saying welcome to everybody, and just some quick reminders here. We're going to mute the line. Actually, do we have the WebEx producer online with us too?
Yes, I'm here.
And what is your name?
Michelle.
Michelle. Well, welcome to our session, and we're always glad to have tech support, so
thank you.
We'll call you if we need you.
Okay.
And so be sure that we've muted everybody's lines at this point, and then I think everybody knows how to raise your hands, use that little icon underneath the participant list, and *6 is your mute and unmute button. And Carolina wants to have dialogue, so we hope that everybody feels comfortable in raising your hand and talking with us. So our topic today is teaching culturally diverse nursing students, and this came as a request when I did my survey at the end of last year. Several of you wanted more information on this, and particularly on information about students whose primary language is not English. And I really didn't know anybody, from my list of contacts, and so I started networking around. And I asked 3 people, and 3 people gave me Dr. Carolina Huerta's name, so I figured she was for sure expert that we needed. And so I contacted her, and we've since, gotten in touch with each other, and I think you're going to have a delightful afternoon with her. And I'll just say, I'll just say she's a faculty member and a department chair and an expert on this topic, and she teaches at the University of Texas. The health system and the campus that she's on is the Pan America campus, and she's going to give you a little more introduction about herself. But Tanya, why don't you go ahead now and give the ball to Carolina, and Carolina, you can, once you see that you're the presenter, you can, I'll just say take it away, and we'll just have a little conversation here, and I'll keep an eye on the people who might have a question as we go along.
Okay.
So do you have the ball?
Yes, I do have the ball. Thank you very much, Dr. Billings. Actually, when you say I'm an expert, I get a little nervous. I have done this quite a bit, but I think there's always something to learn, when it comes to cultural diversity. I want to thank you very much. Thank you. But we have several presentation goals that I would like for us to look at these. I know you received the information beforehand, but nonetheless, I'd like to talk about the learning needs of nursing students for whom English is a second language. I'd like to talk about cultural competence concepts, and one of the things that I did in preparing for today was that in addition to what I know, I actually went through and read the references that I gave you and came up with some cultural competence concepts that I think are important for you to know. The third objective relates to the teaching strategies, which really that should be the focus for today. And then the last one, and this happens as a result of all the readings that I've done on this, is the importance of locating resources, the writing centers, the study groups, putting together study groups, finding test preparation sessions, English as a second language course, etc., on your campus or community. My personal background, I thought I'd just give you a little bit about who I am. I'm a second-generation American. I am from Mexican ethnicity. My mother is from Mexico. My father had been in the United States many, many years. I've been a faculty member here at the university for 39 years and department chair for 19. My university had an associate's degree nursing program for a long, long time, so I taught in that for 20 years. And I currently teach in both the BSN and MSN programs and have done so for a period of 19 years. The University of Texas Pan American is considered a Hispanic serving institution, and we have close to 20,000 students. It has grown very rapidly. In terms of our nursing programs, we have a bachelor's program and we have a master's program with a focus in nurse practitioner and educator roles. We have about 430 nursing students this fall, And what I think is probably most significant is the fact that we have 90.1% overall Hispanic student population. And I'm sure you're aware that the Hispanic population is growing, and so I am going to assume that maybe you will be teaching some Hispanic students where you are. Most of our students are first-generation nursing students, or actually at the university, they're first-generation period. They're not just nursing students that are first generation. I thought that, first of all, to let you know that I am, I guess you could say an expert, but my expertise is related to Hispanics. I really have very little experience dealing with Black populations. We do have large percentage of Filipinos here as well, but the majority, as you can see, of our students are Hispanic. I know that you've had an overview already on culture and cultural competence, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. I know that I'm supposed to be concentrating on teaching these students. However, there are a few things that I think you need to be familiar with, because I think lots of times people get confused about culture and some of the terms that we use when we talk about culture. And some of these key terms or cultural competence concepts that I think are important for me to present to you are that there is a difference between race and ethnicity. And I know you're probably thinking, my God, that's so simple. Of course we know there's a difference between race and ethnicity. But the reality is that many times people will refer to people as, well, they're Hispanic, they're not white. Or they're Hispanic, they're not Caucasian. And the reality is that the majority of Hispanics are Caucasian. So that, you know, we are considered white for the most part. And there are, of course, Hispanics that are Black, and there are Hispanics that are Asian and American Indian. But the point I'm trying to make is that there is a difference between race and ethnicity. And I know that you've had a little bit of information on microaggression, but I think sometimes that's a way to do a little bit of this microaggression by saying, well, Hispanics are not white. Ethnicity, of course, there's many ethnicities. Mine is Mexican. There's African, Cuban, Anglo, etc. And then the other thing that I think is important for you to grasp is that we're not the only America. You know, people from Mexico, for example, are American. So, you know, we tend to be very ethnocentric in the United States. Other things that I'd like for you to recognize, one is that just because people don't speak English doesn't mean they're not smart. And when I went through the readings for preparation for today, there were so many, because a lot of the things I read were qualitative studies, where people were saying that they felt insulted because their teachers didn't recognize that they were smart because they couldn't speak as well as maybe some of the other students. And the other thing that I want to make a point of is whatever I present to you today, I'm not trying to culturally catalog anything, because I don't like textbooks that cultural catalog and think that everybody who is of a certain ethnicity does things a certain way. Because cultural cataloging does reinforce stereotyping and prejudice.
Carolina, can I interrupt just a minute?
Groups are the same. So, and I think that speaks for itself.
Carolina?
Yes?
Yeah. Diane, can I just interrupt a second? Can you speak a little bit louder? Because we're having a little trouble hearing you better. And I'd also like the WebEx people to check, because I'm using the same volume that I always use. So I don't know if there's anything else that can be done with an audio. But anyway, Carolina, see if you can be sure that you're speaking into your the microphone of your phone.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Now can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Okay. Then cultural competence, like I said, I'm really not going to be presenting on that, but because you've already had that. But you know that cultural competence involves values, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. And the main thing I think that is important for cultural competency is to be sensitive. And it's something that we do intentionally to try to become more culturally competent. In terms of, and again, I'm going to really get to the meat that I want to present, but I do feel that you need to know some of these things. some barriers for minority nursing students, and I'm assuming it's not just for Hispanic nursing students. Non-academic barriers include the lack of financial resources. The students, for example, our students very many are the first to attend college, and some of them have very little family support, or they have lack of child care because nurses are primarily women, and there might be some cultural conflict involved with who's taking care of the kids while you go to school. And then there's the lack of role models. Academic problems, of course, include difficulty in mastering the English language, problems with mastering technology, particularly if you're dealing with students in a community college that might be older. A lot of our students here now, after we switched from having an associate degree to a bachelor's program, are your typical young students, and many of them do not have any problems mastering technology, but the older students might have some. And then there's real or perceived prejudice and non-responsive academic advising. And I also found that in my readings that a lot of the students felt that nobody cared enough to advise them academically. And then I mentioned the term racial microaggression, and I know that you are aware of what that means because you already had presentation on that. But racial microaggression, I can tell you, is a real thing. It happens all the time. It's happened to me I don't know how many times. So it is something that is hurtful, and that you have to, if you're sensitive in teaching these students, you've got to recognize that that exists. Racial microaggression refers to subtle, stunning, often automatic, non-physical insults that are directed towards people of color, women, or lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transsexual people. Now, this is what I want to really talk about today, and these are the central concepts that I think are really important for teaching minority students. And what I did for today's presentation is I actually went through and decided on areas, concepts that I think are really important. And I'm going to go through each one of these concepts, and I'm going to have some teaching strategies that go with these concepts. And these 5 concepts are respect for authority, communication, the concept of personalismo, the fact that the students need support, and that cultural conflict does exist in our programs amongst minority students. For example, we want to be a professional student, nurse, etc., but we're also a wife and mother, and there might be some kind of a conflict there because our families expect us to do everything. And then the machismo versus male student nurse. We have a lot of male students in our program. We have about 27% of our students are in the nursing program are male, and they're Hispanic. And there is that conflict of am I a real macho? Because being a student nurse sometimes they're not respected because it's like such a feminine thing to do. So there's that cultural conflict as well. I think that the first concept, respect for authority, is one that you need to pay attention to because a lot of our first-generation college students, Hispanics, feel that they have an unequal power in this relationship. They feel that they have very little personal power, and that leads them not to want to open up or voice personal concerns. They might be having problems with school, they might be having problems at home, but because they see you as the authority and respect you so much, they may not be willing to open up or voice these personal concerns. There's going to be hesitancy for them to kick you out as faculty, and there's going to be issues related to that, and I'm going to give you a few hints in a little bit as to what I think works for us here in dealing with the students. The second concept...
Carolina?
Yes,
Yeah, it's Diane again. And I noticed that one of the scholars has her hand up. It's Lisa Heelan. And if this is a good time for Lisa to... do you have a question or comment?
Diane, Tanya's actually the host of the event, so she would be muting and unmuting lines.
Okay, and the students can do it themselves. Just push press star 6. Lisa?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm just having a hard time hearing what she's saying.
Okay.
Okay, let me try and move the phone
That is
close.
much better.
That's
Thank
much
you.
better.
Better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Lisa.
And thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you.
So the second concept, what I was talking about earlier was the respect for authority. That's the first concept that I want to talk about, teaching strategies related to that. And our Hispanic students tend to really see faculty as being authority and maybe not questioning them, et cetera. They might be hesitant to come to you. So I'm gonna talk a little bit later about some of the things I think you can do to that or for that. The second concept is communication. And our students, many of them have heavy or thick accents, and that might make communication difficult. And some faculty may not understand and may force other forms of communication. One of the readings that I did said that the student said after she graduated actually, that she had a very hard time because her faculty refused to listen to her unless she put it in writing because her accent was so thick. And so she felt very disrespected because of that. Okay. Writing skills, they might be lacking. Actually, I find that writing skills are lacking in all of our students, regardless of their ethnicity. But there are resources at the university level that you can refer the students to so that their writing skills can improve. And then there's the idea that a student thinks in another language and maybe translating literally into English. And so when they write, their writing skills may be lacking for that reason. The third concept is personalismo, and that is in reference to students wanting to feel connected. They want to feel that their professors know them. They want to feel connected to others who know their culture, and they need to feel that the faculty care about them. And so this sense of trust is very important. The fourth concept is the student support. And in terms of student support, there is personal support for Hispanic family is very important. Maybe in our case, we have so many Hispanic students that our students don't feel isolated. But in other places, if you only have one or two Hispanic students or culturally diverse students, they may feel isolated and will really need some of this personal support, and certainly some peer support as well. And then there are the academic resources and support services at your university, such as here we have a Learning Assistance Center that includes our English as a Second Language Institute. We've got a writing center and a testing center that helps the students as well. Other resources that are important in terms of student support, your library, you should develop some knowledge of financial aid and academic advisement and career guidance. There's Career Guidance Center, and then there's the Technology Center as well. And our Technology Center is available to our students probably almost 24 hours a day. If they're at home working on their computers, they can call in and get some support from them. Then I believe this is the last concept, and that I sort of alluded to that, and that is in relation to cultural conflict, in which the women in a Hispanic culture are expected to be the primary caregivers. Males are supposed to be macho, and as I mentioned a little while ago, machismo and nursing kind of don't mix very well. And there is the expectation for usually the female to give up the traditional cultural practices, and women are expected to have self-sacrificing behaviors. And that is something that we used to see a lot more when we taught in the associate degree program, but some of these, especially the women, because they don't have the support at home necessarily, have to do everything, and consequently they failed school, they failed at home. Some of them had part-time jobs. They failed at that too. Their kids were having problems, etc. And that all related to the cultural expectations because they're female. And so that I think that as a faculty member, you need to be aware of the fact that some cultural conflict might exist. This is from one of the readings. It says that the personal and academic relationships between teachers and students are the most important factors influencing student success. And I think that's very true. Okay, now, this is where I'm going to talk a little bit about practical tips for teaching ethnic minorities. And I hope that Dr. Billings can, chime in if she so desires, or any of you have any questions. I'd be happy to slow down some and talk a little bit about each one of them. I took the 5 concepts that I've mentioned at the very beginning and put together the teaching tips under each one of the concepts because for me that was helpful in organizing what I was going to talk to you about today. So here goes. I told you that respect and authority is very, very important to our Hispanic people, that they feel that you are the authority, you're the faculty member, and that they will respect you greatly, which you don't see that a whole lot, I think, with the younger Hispanic students. It's certainly not here, but the older ones you do. And so that it will be your responsibility, in my opinion, to reach out to the student and ask if the student needs help. If you see that your student is not doing well, is not passing maybe your course, recognize that that student is probably not going to go to you and ask you to help them. It's going to be a matter of you reaching out to the student and asking if you can help the student. Perhaps you can encourage the student to interact with you. Maybe you can ask the student to wait after class, that you want to speak to the student, etc. And this would be a good way for the student to interact with you because, as I said, the student's not going to ask you if they can see you, for the most part, okay? One of the things that I think works for us is that we do schedule time at the end of our class period to interact with the students. And I think if you have very few Hispanic students, I think, or other ethnic minority students, that shouldn't be so difficult for you to do, but maybe you can either meet with them as a group or meet with them individually to see what is going on, whether they're doing well in your class, they have questions, etc. And then in terms of their assignments, one of the things that has worked again for me, and I say for us because we team teach, but a lot of times when a student does not understand an assignment or if they don't do well on our assignments and on our exams, we do let them to come in and talk to us and either challenge questions or tell us why they came up with a certain rationale for a question. And sometimes, believe it or not, they have some good ideas as to why they answered the way that they did. So making some time for the student, I think, is something that will be helpful in making you be more effective as a teacher. Other things, respect the student by giving the student an opportunity to explain his or her understanding of the assignment. Assign regular meeting times. When we had the associate degree program, and I keep mentioning that because that was when we had the older students that were more first generation with the cultural conflicts, etc. We actually assigned regular meeting times for them. If I had 10 students in a clinical lab, for example, every week on a Tuesday or a Thursday, each one of the students had a standing appointment for 15 minutes. It was up to the student to come. If the student did not come to your office, that was okay, but we kept anecdotal notes as well, to where we would put down whether they came or didn't come, what we discussed, etc. with them, and that seemed to be helpful to the student. Most of the time they met their appointments, and this was above and beyond actual office hours. I realize that we're supposed to have X number of office hours, but this was in addition to office hours. And then another thing that I thought would be helpful to you is to know a little bit about the culture and have some cultural sensitivity for what your students are talking about. I was raised in a household where my mother wanted to Americanize us so much that we did not have some of these folk medicines, etc., that people do, but I've become very familiar with this over the years. And many of our students, for example, may have a child that's sick and maybe don't come to class. And then you ask them what's wrong with your child, and they may say that the child had mal de ojo, or evil eye. And you ask how did they cure the child, or what did they do, and they usually say my grandmother came over and rubbed an egg all over, said some prayers, and the child got better. So you just need to demonstrate that cultural sensitivity when they're telling you some of this, even though you may not believe it. Don't assume that because the student is nodding her head or his head, it means that he is understanding the assignment. Out of respect for you and recognizing that you're an authority, you may be asking them, do they understand what it is that they're supposed to be doing? And they may nod their head, and yes, I understand, but in reality, that's just being polite, that they do understand. And you might have to dig a little deeper and ask, well, tell me what was this assignment about, or how are you planning to complete this assignment? Questioning the student's understanding of an assignment directly is also something that I think is effective, but it should be done privately because they may never ask you a question again if they feel embarrassed. And also be careful with the use of humor because the student may not understand your humor. A lot of times our students are very stressed and we seem to think that they may be understanding what we're trying to tell them humorously, and they may not. I have an example that I always think of. We had a faculty member who decided that on an exam she was going to have 5 extra questions that were humorous. And some of the students picked up on it, and some of our ethnic minority students didn't, and they were very embarrassed afterwards because they did not understand that the last 5 questions weren't supposed to be humorous questions. And they actually, took time to answer these questions, and then when they found out that they were just a joke, they were very embarrassed. Does anybody have any questions at this point before I go on to the next concept?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's we'll give everybody just a second here to raise their hand, but I would also like at this point if any of the scholars or the faculty have examples to share that are similar to the examples that Dr. Huerta has been giving, but maybe they're related to the students that you see in your classroom. So we'll see if anybody wants to raise your hand and either ask a question or share an example. So let's.
I would be interested in knowing how many of these scholars actually teach in places where there's a big Hispanic population.
Okay. Well, let's. All right. I'll ask it again, and then we can just see by a show of hands. So how many of you are teaching where, we'll say first, a large Hispanic population in your classrooms? And then I think probably the ethnic minorities in New Jersey maybe are different than Hispanic. But Ola, do you want to say something, or are you raising your hand because you have a lot of, you teach Hispanic students? So, Ola, if you want to say something, be sure to go *6 to unmute your line. Ola?
Hello?
Yes, hello.
I was just raising my hand because I have some Hispanic students in my class.
Okay, and what class are you teaching?
Advanced health assessment, nurse practitioner student.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
Great.
Do you have quite a few of them, or
I'm
just a...
from another country, so I can't really much of what you're saying.
From another country. I would imagine that some of the things that I'm talking about will work for any ethnic minority, actually.
Absolutely.
You know, so I'm glad to know that you have, and you have some Hispanic students or no?
And do you have any examples to share from your classroom?
No, not no.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, well, thanks for giving us this feedback. And let's see, Amelia, *6 to unmute. So, Amelia, if you would like to speak with us. Yeah?
Yes. My population is kind of mixed. I have some Hispanics, but a lot of students from other countries as well. I don't have any examples right now, but a lot of the strategies are applicable to, to the other population as well.
I agree. That's when I put this together. Primarily, it's because my experience is with Hispanics, but I think a lot of these things are common sense things that will probably help all of our students, regardless of what ethnicity. The next concept that I'm going to talk about is personalismo or personalism.
Carolina, before you go, Donna Fountain also has her hand raised. So while we're on this little moment here, I'll ask Donna, *6, if you can speak with us. So, Donna, you can hit *6 and either ask a question or make a comment, or otherwise we'll just assume you're raising your hand to indicate you have some Hispanic students in your class.
Yes. My classroom is multicultural, so it's actually like international. And so a lot of the concepts and phenomena that you spoke of is used in the largest part just for faculty to remain culturally sensitive to all cultures and encourage the students to have, self-respect for their own ethnic identity.
Okay. What do you do at your school that helps the faculty be prepared?
I work at Many at King, so our whole philosophy is transcultural nursing.
Okay, great.
We come in with that philosophy, and we incorporate it actually in each of our classes. And so the students have a taste of cultural competency component throughout the coursework.
We do too. Actually, that's part of our philosophy and conceptual framework, and we incorporate the cultural concepts even in the paperwork for clinical, where they have to address the culture of the client and that they're taking care of. So I'm glad to know you're doing that as well.
Yes. Okay.
Great. And then, Carolina, we have one more student, Munira Wells.
Okay.
Hi, how are you? I hope you can hear me.
I can. Yes.
Okay. I actually also have adjuncted at Kane, and like the others have said before me, we do spend a lot of time with international students, and I think all the suggestions that you have are wonderful. I think spending time with them is also a big piece because oftentimes they bring so much experience and so much knowledge with them, and they're frustrated because their written and their spoken communication with us in English doesn't convey the wealth of that information. So, you do have to spend some time setting them at ease and letting them know that you really are responsive to their ideas and what they bring to the table and help them out with expressing those and, articulating those ideas.
So true. I think it's really all a matter of the faculty wanting to do this. Because you can have it in your philosophy and conceptual framework, but if people don't take it to heart, it doesn't really matter. So I'm glad to know that you feel that way too.
Yeah, it is very much part of the Kane philosophy. I actually went for my bachelor's and master's there as well. And so I've kind of seen that as a student. I've been on the receiving end of it, and it does help you to then be able to, be a proponent of it because you see how well it works for you, and then you're able to transmit it to your own students when your turn is there.
right.
Okay, well, thanks.
Okay.
Got a whole lot of other stuff that I want to present, so.
Yep. Go for it. I think we've got everybody who had their hand raised.
All right. Okay. Well, the next concept, and again, I really appreciate the things that you've said to me, because I think this one also applies to any one of the ethnicities, and that is that people want to feel connected, or students want to feel like they're connected, and especially if they are the only people that are different from the other students. And so one of the strategies is to try to learn something about your students. And you can ask a few personal questions. I'm not asking for you to really get involved with everything in their personal lives, but, you know, it makes a person feel important if you at least ask, are you married? Do you have children? You know, how old are your kids? Or, you know, where do you live, et cetera. So I think our students want to feel that you want to know something about them. The other thing that you can do is increase the relevance of your lectures and assignments. Try to connect with the students' experiences. If, for example, you're teaching a research course, then maybe you can assign some readings in terms of research among certain populations. Or you can give examples of certain studies that you're aware of that dealt with cultural issues or ethnicities. One of the other things that we do, and I think it strengthens our philosophy and conceptual framework where everybody knows that we consider culture to be important, and that is that we require that our beginning nursing students write on a cultural paper on themselves. And we follow Madeline Leininger's outline, and the students talk about their lives and how all this relates to their culture. And it certainly makes them feel like you care about them, in addition to makes them sensitive about the importance of culture. And in terms of test questions, it would be nice if you can connect again with some of the experiences, but at the same time, please be careful and not to stereotype. You don't want every question that has Jose eating beans and rice, for example, that, you know, want to be very careful about that. And then, again, helping your students with assignments, ask for their rationale for the answers, and that comes from sitting with your student, having them come see you, or if you're doing everything online, calling you, or having some teleconference with them, etc. Other things, have an open house. I don't know how many of you have like an orientation with your students maybe when they get admitted to the nursing program. Maybe you can have a big orientation and have an open house, and I put a lab open house because I think that a lot of families are fascinated to know what it is that the students are going to be doing. And if you invite the families to come over, you're accomplishing one of two things. One is you're letting the family know what the student is doing, particularly if you have a cultural conflict there, you know, that why is she gone all day, or why is he gone all the time, and now they know what the student is doing. And then the second thing it accomplishes in my mind is that if there are children, this might be the first time that they realize that they want to go to school, that they want to go to college, especially since mom or dad might be first-generation college students. Recognizing that the students have different learning styles. I don't know how much you've learned about the different learning styles, but learning styles are something that you become familiar with if you're a faculty member. And with Hispanic students, from what I've read and what I've observed, we have this task orientation. And what that means in terms of strategies is that you give the student enough time at the beginning. If you're going to test them, then you give them enough time to get their acts together, to get their papers together, to put the first down, to do whatever needs to be done so that they can be totally focused on the task at hand. The third concept is communication skills, and as I already mentioned, and several of you mentioned as well, that communication skills are so important, and sometimes we judge students by the fact that they can't speak English correctly, and there are some things that you can do. For example, there are different instructional strategies that maybe you might be familiar with. You might encourage students either to purchase flashcards for studying, or or maybe make their own flashcards, etc., recognizing that English may be a problem for these students. Minority students may need more than one way to teach them. You know, just because you stand up in front of a classroom or do a integrity lecture on a Blackboard platform doesn't mean that they're getting it. So you need to see when you talk to them, to encourage them to read the information, to hear it, to see it, maybe to have hands-on in order to learn. So actually, I guess what I'm saying is dealing with ethnic minority students is very time-consuming if you want to be an effective teacher and have them succeed. And you have to have that mindset. You can assess their language skills if you think that they're lacking in their language skills. There are a lot of resources, depending on where you're working, that you can refer the student to. And, for example, we here at our university, we have an English as a Second Language Institute that we can send our students to. One of the problems here with the ESL Institute, though, is that they charge extra because they're a unit in the university, but they're funded separately. But our Learning Assistance Center includes our library, includes the writing center, the test-taking skill center, etc. So it's a multi-pronged approach to getting your students to really learn the materials and be successful in your course. Other things, providing the students with clear objectives. I don't know how many of you are actually doing the educator role in your master's or in your doctoral program, but I teach that, and a lot of people, when they come in, nurses, even if they've been teaching for a while, don't realize that sometimes the objectives they put together are not clear, and sometimes they have multiple things in an objective. And I think the simpler, the clearer, the better. And so sometimes it takes skill to be able to do that, but if you're willing to, there's a lot of information in textbooks, et cetera, on how to write clear objectives. Speak slowly. Repeat yourself if necessary. Stop. Did you understand what? And that's for everybody, you know. Sometimes, as I said, students are embarrassed to ask, or maybe they think they're the only ones that didn't hear what you're saying, or the only ones that didn't understand what you're saying. So if you have to, speak slowly and repeat yourself. And stop and ask if there's any questions and mean it. In other words, you can't just say, okay, any questions, and keep on looking at your lecture notes and not even raise your hand to see whether anybody has any questions, because it might take a few seconds before a student gets the guts to answer questions or to ask you questions. You know, I even think of myself sometimes when I'm somewhere that I'm feeling like I don't have as much power, and maybe there's someone really, you know, that's special doing a presentation. Before I ask a question, my heart beats 150 beats a minute. And it makes me feel like, oh, my God, I don't know if I can ask. So stop, ask, mean it, and indicate that you're accessible after class. And one other thing that I do when I teach my students that I have heard from them over and over that is very helpful to them, and that is that I provide the students with an outline of my lecture. It's like, well, because if English is a problem for them and they're having trouble following your lecture, they can at least look at that piece of paper where you've outlined what you're teaching today, you know. And I'm talking about really outlining, like I'm going to talk about the 5 concepts related to teaching Hispanic nursing students, and they'll know, okay, well, that's what she's talking about here. So it's very helpful in organizing our students and to give them some kind of an outline. Review the main points of the lecture at the end of the class. Provide frequent verbal and written feedback to the students, and again, that's for all students, not necessarily ethnic minority students. Give the student time to explain what he or she is saying. You know, don't rush them because you don't understand what they're saying. Just say, okay, repeat that to me, please, you know, and see whether you can get them to tell you what it is that they need for you to explain. And always communicate positive nursing images of minorities. And this is something that I think is is important for all ethnicities, and I find that as something that doesn't always happen when we test or we go places, and almost all the images that are being communicated to the public, to our students, are of white, non-Hispanic, non-other ethnicities, okay, or other races even. So because there's few role models, it would be nice to have communicating positive nursing images of minorities. As far as, particularly for the beginning nursing students, I think including a dictionary and a thesaurus on a textbook list is important. I'm always amazed at how poorly students write, and I always ask myself, how did they get through English? How did they get through their English classes? But the reality is that I think that a lot of our students are being passed because I think the standards for the written word have decreased some. I don't know, Some of the rules I learned about grammar are no longer relevant, I think. But including this dictionary and thesaurus on the textbook list, I think, would be something that would be beneficial for the students. And when I say dictionary, I'm not necessarily just talking about a medical dictionary, because most nursing programs for the initial courses do require students to buy a medical dictionary. Encourage your students to take lectures, or if you can, and this is what we're doing, we do almost all of our lectures on Blackboard, or if you have another platform, and this way the students can listen to your lectures over and over. If you don't have that facility at your institution, well, allowing the students, or actually encouraging the students to take your lectures, I think, is something that can be effective and help them study again and again what it is that you were trying to convey to them. And if possible, you could use a learning styles inventory to find out how your students learned. So that's in terms of this communication concept. So those are just a few strategies, and I imagine there are probably some more strategies. And I do see that somebody has their hand raised here, I believe. Diane?
Okay, I think it's Amelia, and I don't know if it's because you didn't put it down, but if you have a question, Amelia, now's a good time to ask it, and for anybody else, too, while we're on this little pause here. So, Amelia, let us know if you have a comment or a question. *6.
No? Okay. All right. And the next concept relates to the concept of support.
Wait, just hold on just 1 minute. Nanette, do you have, your hand is up, so I want to be sure that you, if you have a comment or a question, that you have an opportunity. Nanette Sulik. *6 to open the line. Hi, Nanette. Nanette, looks like you're trying to get in. *6. If not, we'll come back to you later, okay? So be ready to hold your question, and we'll continue on. But if you want to speak with us, we'll ask you one more time. Okay. Go ahead, I'll say. Yeah.
The concept of support, and I already mentioned to you having maybe, if you teach the beginning nursing students, a period at the very beginning of the semester that is an orientation period. A lot of our students have very little knowledge of how to manage their time. And so introducing the concept of time management skills to them, showing them how to use a calendar or a to-do list, or even something as simple as how many hours should they devote to each course. Our students, they have so many readings. It's really crazy that we expect them to read 10 chapters for next 2 days from now. So to give them some hints on how to manage their time. Again, the Learning Assistance Center, some of the Learning Assistance Centers might have courses on time management and test taking, and I have a personal experience with that. One of my sons went to Texas A&M, it's a very good school here in Texas, and he's a smart kid, but when he got there, he floundered. And when it was December and he made C's and I think 1D, somebody said to us, well, why don't you send him for time management? There are courses that the university offers, and we did. He went to school a little early before the spring semester, and he took a time management course and actually graduated in 4 years, which is almost unheard of, okay? So I believe that this time management is something that is very helpful to the students. Refer to whatever resources you think. If it's financial aid they're having trouble with, well, refer them to the financial aid office. Assigning a mentor as a role model, I mentioned that there are few role models and few positive images that include other ethnic minorities, and if there are people in your community that have graduated from your program, perhaps you can assign a student to that particular person who can then function as a role model. Forming study groups, a lot of our students like to form study groups. The one thing I do caution about that is that if they're forming study groups and you're trying to help them, try to make sure that there are not all the weak students in the study group. Sometimes when the students feel comfortable with each other, they all get together and maybe they're the 4 weakest students you've got in class, and all they do is reinforce each other's weaknesses. So if you can have a hand at it, maybe you can suggest who could be in the study group. And it would be nice to have more than one person. Let's say if you have 8 students or 6 students that are Hispanic, it would be nice to include maybe 2 of them in a study group, but not 4 or 5 of them. So they'll feel comfortable with the other students as well. Using coaches for minority students, same concept as using mentors. And there's been a lot written recently about coaches for students, all students, and mentoring students. And then pairing students, as I said, with another minority student, that would be nice. But again, don't pair all the minority students together. And then facilitating the joining of an ethnic nursing student organization. We do not have any ethnic student nursing organizations. We don't even have a local chapter of the National Association of Hispanic Nurses. And so that is kind of a difficult thing to do, but I'm thinking that maybe in New Jersey there might be, in your area, maybe for black nurses or for Hispanic nurses, maybe there's a student nurses organization that you can facilitate that the students join that particular nursing organization. Including students on committees. Accreditation visitors usually really like to see who's on your committees, and they like the inclusion of students because that indicates that the student is involved in governance of the program somewhat. And so maybe including some of your minority students on these committees. Maybe we'll make them stronger in terms of verbalizing or feeling more secure being at the university, because they're actually on a committee and their opinions are valued. If you need to, you can send your students to the Instructional Technology Center for technological support. If that's helpful to the student, maybe the student is having difficulty figuring out how to work Blackboard or how to hear the Tegrity lectures or whatever, so that you can send the students, be aware of who to send the students to. Encouraging family involvement, the same thing as I mentioned a little while ago, like the open house, or, for example, in our nurse practitioner track, when they do their client assessment course, they bring family members or friends or anyone that they want to bring to be part of the physical assessment checkoff. And that is including the family in some respects, or at least encouraging the students to bring family or friends or people they feel comfortable with. Including NCLEX preparation courses as part of course fees. We have, and I'm very proud to say, that over the last 5 years, our NCLEX average is 95.1%, which is pretty high considering the 90.1% Hispanic student population. And it has not always been that high, but one of the things that we did is we actually have students pay for the NCLEX preparation in their senior year, their last semester, and it's part of their course. And so we've been very fortunate. The students have been doing well on NCLEX. Because, you know, it's not enough to bring in minority students, in my opinion. If when they graduate, they can't pass boards. We want them to not only be successful in their classes, but actually successful in terms of actually achieving that nursing career. And then the last concept that of the 5 that I had mentioned to you is this cultural conflict. And again, utilizing ethnic role models for presentations, inviting, maybe you know that the head of the director of nurses at a hospital, a big hospital, happens to be an ethnic minority and you're teaching leadership. Maybe you can invite that person to come do a presentation or get involved in lecturing your students. Or, as I said earlier, mentoring your students as well. Acknowledging, and I think one of the students alluded to this, that we need to acknowledge that these cultural conflicts exist. We have to acknowledge that sometimes we're not as well prepared or culturally competent, and so that we need to be sensitive enough to be willing to learn more about the student and let the student talk about any family issues that he or she might have. Schedule office hours, again, to be available for the students. Again, strongly encourage them to come, and I said don't give them a choice, which of course is wrong. I mean, they do have the choice, but make it sound like it's something that is for them, that is part of being successful in your course. Other things, and I mentioned this to you again, I'll mention it again, is that making nursing attractive, using minority nursing images in the written materials. If you're really serious about wanting to have more Hispanics or more blacks or more Filipino, Asians, you know, then you need to make sure that what the brochures and information you're putting out there uses minority nurses images on it. And, you know, then the student will say, hey, they welcome people like myself there. So that's another thing to consider. And then educating other faculty regarding transcultural concepts. And sometimes that's difficult. I would like to think that all of the faculty that work for us really have bought into this cultural competence idea. But to tell you the truth, when I hired these people, we were so desperate for faculty that the joke was if they had a heartbeat, we were going to hire them. And so most of the faculty that stay and are happy with us, though, do buy into the idea that being culturally competent is something that is necessary in order to be a successful faculty member and making sure that our students are successful when they graduate. Using peer tutors, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. If the peer tutors are strong students, then that's okay. And then create a system for early faculty intervention, successful retention plan. Maybe it's a matter of actually identifying the students who are at risk and paying attention to see how they're doing. You know, we have here at our university something called an early warning system, where students that are not progressing well enough at midterm are actually notified and they're encouraged to come to see their faculty advisor in the program that they're in, and that has been helpful as well. What else can you do as faculty? And after I do this, I'm going to stop a little bit and see if you have any other ideas. And then lastly, I have actually a few tips for test taking or for producing tests for the students to take. So in my opinion, what are some other things faculty can do? Well, you could perform a cultural self-assessment on if you have any pull with your faculty maybe and you think there might be an issue, maybe you can do a cultural self-assessment where each faculty has the opportunity to do some introspection about how they feel about culture. HRSA has a big website on cultural competence, and I have found that to be very helpful whenever I've done some consultation with faculty. Recognizing racial microaggression exists. I know that there are some faculty that just laugh it off. It's not funny. It's hurtful. And so you need to work it's a conscious effort to work on your communication skills. I have been, as I told you earlier, the victim of this many times. I had one man who stopped me at the grocery store because I had a T-shirt on that said I was a graduate of Texas A&M, and he was an Aggie, and he came up to me and he said, whatever class he was, and he asked me, and I said, I got my doctorate from Texas A&M, and he said, can you imagine a little Mexican girl having a doctorate from Texas A&M? And this happened like 2 years ago, so I've had it happen over and over, and it's hurtful. In his mind, he thought maybe he was giving me a compliment. Maybe not. So we need to consciously work on communication skills. Continue your education and learning about cultures. How can you do that? Well, there's lots and lots of books available. And as I said, if nothing else, get on the web and get on the HRSA website, and you'll find information about learning about cultures and how to become more culturally competent. Recognizing, I certainly do, and that's why I said to you, I'm not an expert on all cultures. I'm not even an expert, I don't think, on all Hispanics. I'm an expert in my mind on the Hispanics in South Texas. So I feel that you do not have to be an expert on all the cultures, but you do have to be sensitive and understanding of others. And it's something that you're probably thinking, well, we all know that. Yeah, we all know that, but it's something sometimes that's difficult to achieve. Use activities that promote awareness of culture and cultural competence. In the course that we teach, that's the beginning nursing course that we teach students, and they end up having to do that cultural self-assessment, if you will, paper. We also have a culture day where everybody brings foods from their culture, and then they actually have to talk about it. So there are ways that you can incorporate culture into your courses, and that sends the message to the students that you recognize that culture is important and that you value people that are diverse. Developing culturally sensitive material, displaying success stories of minority graduates, and again, helping start an ethnic organization if there isn't one that exists, helping start one, and of course, that requires a lot of energy, and one of the reasons why we don't have one, I think, is because it requires so much energy and our faculty is old, including me. So it is a hard thing to do, but maybe some of you who are full of energy can do that. Demonstrating a caring attitude, and that's important too. So I'm going to stop right here and see if there are any questions or comments or things that we think maybe have worked for you or that maybe I need to be aware of, etc. So if you want to, please ask questions.
Yeah. Now it's time to raise your hand, share examples, or ask questions, and while you guys are thinking of your questions, and really I'd like the questions to come from those of you that were particularly wanting information on this topic. So if we've not addressed your needs, now is the time to ask those questions. Caroline, a couple of things that you said came to mind. My experience has been most recently in the doctoral program, and we had international students, and many of them seem to be coming from the Middle East. And one thing that happened in my class is before I had students submit a paper, they did a peer review with each other. I paired them up, and kind of randomly, but from that peer review of each other's reading the paper and giving each other feedback, I think that was really helpful on both sides. But particularly for the minority students it was helpful for them to see an example of how another student was writing the paper. And they learned more from that example than probably from anything else in the class. So that was one tip that
I like that. I like that idea. We haven't done that here.
So that's an idea. And then, you've mentioned several times, about the importance of the food. And again, I had a student from Qatar, and before the semester started, she invited all the faculty she was going to have be her faculty that semester over to her house and, served a dinner for us. And it was really a nice way for us to get to know her and her needs, and for her to feel more comfortable with us and, hear us speak and know a little bit more about us. So, I think sometimes the students who are, and again, this is a doctoral student, so she probably is a little more savvy in how to, reach out here a little bit. But I thought that was a good idea, too. But at our school, we too had, they set days when people, from various ethnic groups, we featured, and the students brought in the food, and the faculty and other students could come, and it was a nice way to get to know each other, but also to appreciate the culture.
I agree with you. And something else that we do on the same day, because it's a long class, we actually watch a movie that has, a different culture, perhaps. Maybe we've watched even My Big Fat Greek Wedding, Under the Same Moon, which is about a Hispanic family. I mean, and the students enjoy it. And so, it doesn't have to be drab what we're presenting. We can actually make it fun sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that.
So we use a lot of movies. In fact, we have instituted a course fee because we can't afford things unless we have students pay. And so we have a big library of films that we show our students.
Oh, nice.
Educational, primarily in the undergraduate program. In the graduate program, I believe that this support that you're mentioning in terms of going to somebody's house is, to me, that was probably what got me through my doctoral program. Our faculty were so open to having us come to their house.
Yes, that's a good idea.
As students and find out that we're not alone, that somebody actually seems to care whether we're going to graduate or not. So.
Right. And I too like to have the students over because then I think they, it's that first elite mode. They get to know us and we get to know them. Okay, Tony.
There is from Nanette. She couldn't do her unmuting, but she said we had a very bright Chinese student who could study and pass tests, but could not communicate with patients because of her spoken English. And it became an issue in developing a therapeutic relationship with patients and also safety in an emergent situation. Can you speak to this, as she's asking? And actually, I don't have any experience of that sort because, as you know, I've been down here almost my whole career in teaching, and our population is overall probably 95% Hispanic. I have seen that happen, though, when we've had people from another country and we can't communicate with them. Diane, do you have any experience with that?
Well, I don't have experience, but here's a suggestion because we've been talking a lot about simulations in this CLC, and I'm wondering for the students, because I know often we do simulations that have to do with therapeutic relationships, and certainly also the ones that have to do with working in emergency situations. Usually it's doing a code or something like that. And maybe that would be a way to be sure that everybody has an experience of communicating and, discussing with, in the role play of the simulation. And I suppose there's other ways that you could do role play, but I think that would be key to, being sure that all levels, all aspects of the profession, not only just the written word, but also the spoken word. So that, would be a thought for a teaching strategy.
And I'm assuming that this became an issue for this particular student when she was a student, or he was a student. So I don't know. I guess part of it would be, again, to refer the student, if there's really that much difficulty understanding the student, referring the student to the language center to see whether maybe they took some courses in improving their language. That would be helpful.
Yes.
I imagine I would like to think every university has an ESL, center. I'm not sure, but I would think big universities do.
Yes.
Maybe that referral would be also something that you could do.
Yeah.
Because I can understand the safety issue. I'm sure that would be an issue for anybody.
Right.
You don't know what she's saying. So. Okay. Anything else?
Well, Tony Malik had a question, and
can you hear me?
So we'll call in Tony and see if his star 6 is working, and then Nanette has a follow-up. But let's go ahead and hear from Tony first.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Or?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I just have a question. Do you find a big difference between minority students who spend high school years here as opposed to the ones who came after high school?
Yes, most definitely. Yes, because the students that have come, like maybe they are first generation Americans, but they came when they were like maybe 2 or 3 years old, so they've been in the school system the whole time. There's not usually any issues with them in terms of their ability to speak English or write it. The only issue that I see with them sometimes is because their parents have spoken Spanish the whole time, that's the only way they can interact. You know, they ask their questions in Spanish, and in front of the other students, the majority who can understand, but not everybody can understand, and so you have to kind of gently say, could you please ask that in English, so everybody else can understand. Now, the ones that came over when they were maybe in their teens, that is more of an issue, you know, but we work with them again and try to send them to the appropriate resource centers to help them. And in order to get into our nursing program, as I'm sure for you all as well, it's only the best and the brightest, so we are aware that they have the brain cells. And so we try to work with them. We actually even wrote a grant from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, a retention grant. But that, of course, will be a different topic, but we've worked really hard to retain our students who are at risk, with English also being a second language.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question, Tony. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay, good. And Mary Ann McDermott has a question, and then after Mary Ann, I'm going to go back because Nanette has sent us some more information about the student that she was working with that was from China.
Is it time for me?
Yes, hi, Mary Ann. Go ahead.
Hi. Actually, I have a question, but then I have another little vignette about something that happened, and I'll give you the vignette first. I was doing a terminal practicum with students in a school in New York where I worked, and it was a 8-hour shift clinical, and they worked with a baccalaureate mentor, and my job was to just be like Pearl Mesta. As I said, I would go from hospital to hospital and see how my 15 students were. And anytime I got to this one, her mentor would not be too enthusiastic. And finally I said, okay, let us just break this down. What's the problem? She said she doesn't know what we're talking about. And indeed, it appeared in conversation that the student was following, but she wasn't. This is a senior. In her last 7-week practicum, if she would fail that course, she was out. And I was so upset, for one, because it was dangerous, and somebody mentioned that, safety. She was unsafe in practice. And I just, won't make a long story short, I pulled her out of clinical and spoke to the director of the program prior to this and made a deal with her. I would give her an incomplete if she showed me a signed contract that she would go to a professional English language. She went to a school for diplomats in Manhattan. I didn't even know such a thing existed, but she knew. They knew it all along. But my bone of contention was we failed that student because she should have been stopped a long time ago by faculty. How come I was the only one who picked up on it? I'm no smarter than the other faculty, and I wasn't with her all the time. So, I think as faculty, we have a responsibility. It's not always be nice. It's to really maybe stop them and say, you really have a problem. Maybe her can say something about that. But my other comment was, and this was another instance, I had a group of 10, and I was in what I call lockdown clinical. And of the 10, 8 of them were Russian. And and so the two English-speaking students and we were the minority because they would always speak in Russian. And my out was, clinical was in a VA, and I said to them, you are not allowed to speak anything but English here, and you are out of clinical if you do it. And so that forced them to use English. But what do you do if the majority of your students are of a particular ethnic group or culture and they become the group? And you don't want to dishonor the fact that they need to communicate, but in fact it's not in English.
But you do the exact same thing. In our case, the minority students are our white non-Hispanics. And a lot of them don't speak Spanish. And when, like for example, when I've taken students to clinical, and I'm assuming the faculty do the same thing, when a student starts talking in Spanish to each other, I stop it. So you cannot do that. Now, I tell you what, I'd be hard-pressed to tell them I'll fail you if you do, but it's like a matter of courtesy.
Oh, no, I wasn't. I mean, it was a government rule. They had to speak English. So, I didn't care. I almost had a really good out with clinical, and I would stop them in school, in class. But it's just a general thing because I think if you only have one or two, it's easier. But if they are the majority, 8 out of 10 spoke Russian.
I want to know who put that group together.
Well, unfortunately, at the time, the students who were accepted into the program, while the mission of the school said they needed to reflect the cultural groups in the city of New York, they did not. 80% of the class at that point was Russian. And that was when the floodgates opened, and, there were a lot of healthcare workers in Russia, and they wanted to continue. And, so after a while, it changed, but they were, sometimes 50%. And we had to get together as a faculty and figure out a way to handle it. Because they said we were discriminating. And maybe in New York, it's different, but discrimination, who wants to be, held up for that? Anyhow, that was...
Sometimes I think this, Diane, goes back to, designing the learning activities and, certain ways that we can get people in different groups. I love, the team-based learning where they line up in various ways and then they end up in groups where the expertise is, diversified around in each of the groups. And, the peer review, the pairing up the non-English speaking person with the English speaking person to do some things, role play. It seems like some of these strategies.
Well, I think that as faculty, we did not prepare. We had no idea how overwhelming this influx of students would be. We had never had, we always had, immigrant populations with English second language, but it was nothing, it was absolutely incredible. And so, if you work in the Northeast, as many of the people on this webinar are, you may in fact be in a school, where at some point, depending on the wave of, people coming in from other countries if they don't speak English. Anyhow, I'm going to mute myself till I shut up, okay?
That's why we're having this session, and I'm going to do my moderator role, Carolyn, because we have just about, 10, maybe 15 if we stretch, 10 minutes here to kind of finish up. And I know we have the case study, and we'll give some suggestions on what to do with that if we don't get to it now. And Tammy, if we have time, I'll come back to you. But let's try to.
I'm almost done, actually. But
oh, okay. Well, then if we have time for more discussion, we will. Okay.
I think that I'm going to kind of run through this. Some of the stuff I already mentioned, but this is specifically in relation to testing. And the first thing that I've got on here is that, we have this mindset that students have to finish the test by a certain time because the boards are time tests, etc. But I think initially with students, it's okay to extend the testing time if possible. There's that rule, at least that I've heard, that you usually give a minute per question, but If the question is very complex, I would give more than a minute. At least, as I said at the beginning, when the student is maybe a beginning student and is just getting into figuring out how to take these tests. Giving the student the opportunity to give their rationale for answer choices. I mentioned earlier that we would allow the students to meet with us and challenge questions. Actually, at one point, we would actually allow the student to write the rationale for why they picked the question that they did, the answer that they did for the question. Now, that can be very time-consuming, and you might end up with a lot of writing. But we, of course, did not allow that either. It was like only for those questions that you answered a certain way because you really think that's the right answer. So giving the student the opportunity to give you their rationale for their answer choice can be effective. Do not include extraneous information in the test question stem. I don't know how many of you have so much experience teaching. Maybe you have been creating tests for 20 years like me or 30. But, you know, if you're going to write a test question that includes a case scenario, why include that the patient is 22 years old and is married and has 2 kids and all this stuff if the response, you know, doesn't require any of that information? If it can be more clearly stated in the stem of the question, then I think that will work better. So please don't include any extraneous information in the test question stem. Make your questions clear and succinct. Recognize that the students, again, may need a task orientation time to organize themselves at the beginning of the exam. Give them definitions. You know, I know there are some faculty, because I've worked with them, who feel that, geez, you know, I should not have to give them a definition for a word that seems to me to be everyday ordinary. Well, some of these students whose primary language is not English, may not understand the question. And if it isn't going to give the answer to them, then why not tell them what the word means? You know, if you have a test question that uses the word like contingent, something is contingent on, and they don't know what the word contingent means, I think it's appropriate if they ask you what does the word mean to tell them. So provide definitions if possible. Make sure that the study group members are strong test takers, and I already mentioned that. If you're going to help them form study groups, make sure that you have people there that are not weak, and that they're just reinforcing each other. Providing a test blueprint, I don't know if this is the same for you all in New Jersey, but in the state of Texas, the Board of Nursing required at one point that all tests have a test blueprint, and they don't have enough money now to monitor us about this, but we've kept up with providing a test blueprint. Right before, like a couple of days before the student is going to be tested, the student is aware of what is going to be covered, how many questions are going to be on this, how many questions on that, etc. And they seem to like it, and it seems to be helpful to them. Reviewing the student's test responses as often as needed. Initially here we had this rule that a student could only look at the test question or the test, you know, review it once. They could not come back and review the exams multiple times. Well, we found that if we allowed the students to review the exams as many times as they wanted to, they did better on their comprehensive exams, you know, as their finals. So we are of the opinion here as a team that our students should be able to look at their tests anytime that they want to if they set up an appointment with you. And you are their clinical teacher and you're the one that's going to go over the test with them, why not? That'll make them stronger. Other things, including cultural diversity in your test questions, I mentioned that earlier. Please don't stereotype. Don't always make the case scenario using Jose, as I said, as the maintenance worker somewhere, etc. Years ago, we had a faculty member who was marked down on a case study that the students would do, so we got on her case, because if the students, it was for OB, and the students were doing a case study, if they didn't put down that the family ate beans and rice, she'd have a nervous breakdown over it. And, you know, one time one of the students put down that their preferred food was shrimp, and she didn't believe it. So, let's try not to stereotype. anybody in terms of their foods or whatever, their likes are. Making sure that the STEM and the answers that are related to a scenario are on the same page. Sometimes I don't know very much about your testing, but for us, we would have a little case scenario and have maybe 3 questions related to the same case scenario. Well, it's important that all 3 questions that relate to that scenario are on the same page, because otherwise the student will be distracted and will have to go from the one page to the other to reread the scenario, etc. Don't write more than 3 questions related to the same scenario. I think if you write 5 questions, that's a little confusing then to the student to try to keep track of or remember what was in the case scenario. Limit multiple questions. I hear that the Board of Nursing exam or the NCLEX exam does have some multiples, but in my opinion, those can be very confusing to the students. And in case you don't know what I'm talking about, it's when the answers are A and B, D and E, or C only, D and whatever. So try to limit that type of testing, say, in the question. Make the distractors believable so that the student actually has to do some critical thinking. Probably one of the hardest jobs that we have as faculty is having to develop test questions. And I realize that a lot of our textbooks come with tests, but, I'm a believer of really paying attention to them, and because a lot of those are very easy because the person that wrote the book is just one more thing they have to do to put a test together. Make sure that there's only one best answer, otherwise you will have people challenging your test. And alphabetizing the answers. To me, that's a very simple thing to do to prevent C from always being the right answer. We get into a pattern where maybe the students pick it up. It's like, oh, wow, did you notice that every answer was C? Well, if you alphabetize the answers, you will at least be paying attention to that idea, and that it can't turn out to be the same answer every time. So alphabetizing to me is a good idea. Keep a tally of the correct answers so that there's no patterns, because like I said, the students do certainly pick up on that. Don't stereotype or use sexist language, using ethnic names in unflattering scenarios, or always referring to the nurse as she in test questions. We've had male faculty who have really resented that, and we've changed to where we try to be gender neutral or take turns in terms of whether the nurse is a he or a she. If you're using essay questions, you should have an idea as to the length of the response. Maybe you can tell them in 3 paragraphs or less, explain something or other. Because if you don't give them a length of the response, you might get 3 pages of nothing, of the student just beating around the bush because they really didn't know the answer. If you're giving fill in the blanks, and again, this relates to anybody, not just ethnic minorities, make sure that you specify the length of the response. It's very frustrating when you see a test question that uses fill in the blanks, which we try not to use a whole lot of anyway, and there's just one big long blank, and actually the teacher wanted 3 or 4 responses in that same blank. So specify the length of the response for each one of the fill in the blank. And that's basically it. And here I had said any questions. I also have the case study after this.
Okay, and I think in interest of time, we'll leave the case study for each scholar to do on their own, or if you're working in groups with your mentor or your faculty member, feel free to use this case study as a jumping off point for further information. And again, Caroline, I'm going to thank you ever so much for presenting with us. The information you gave us was just spot on. We really had some great tips here and some good questions from everybody. And Caroline, if you can just advance up there, I want to remind everybody at our next session we're going to be meeting face-to-face on February 9th. So we're next year, and we will let let you know where we're going to have our meeting as soon as we can get it finalized for you. But more to follow, and I'm going to get us signed off because we have another session that's going to start at 3. Everybody needs to sign off and log into the next session. And this next session is particularly for the master students. Everybody's welcome, but those of you that are master students and are going to be graduating this next spring or summer, we want you to come and get some ideas of how to explore finding your ideal nursing position, faculty position. So I'm going to wish everybody happy holidays and a happy new year, and we'll see you back next year. Dr. Huerta, do you have any other final comments for us? And again, thank you.
All right. No final comments. I'm here if you ever need me again.
Okay, and I don't know if you can see up there on the participant list, we have some happy faces. So I'll take that as a nice comment back from the scholars and the participants today. So.
Right. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to speak to your students.
This was great. I loved it myself. I'm inspired. Okay.
And I will be corresponding with you via email, okay?
Yes, that will be great. It was fabulous.
Thank you, Dr. Billings. Bye-bye, guys. Happy New Year. And Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, okay?
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.